I'm just starting with recording, and then I'm going to broadcast. So you're all set, Judy.
Okay, so first item on the agenda is the Brown School feasibility study discussion. Is there an update for us on that?
This is Andy Port. There is actually, we have Mike Lindstrom from Studio MLA, which is the firm that's doing this study for us on Newburyport Youth Services, or NYS. They're looking at both the Brown School and the Low Street site that is currently under the National Guard. The mayor and I and Andy Egmont from Youth Services have been working on that with them. Mike is here to just speak to that with me. We've been working together, so we're probably going to offer the same sort of comments, and there's a limited role or interface or overlap between the youth services project that they're doing for us and housing, because they're not actually doing any plans for housing at the Brown. But there is obviously some overlap or consideration that it might be relevant. So Mike's here tonight. I appreciate him joining us. He's been allowed to speak as well. And I'm happy to pull up any plans that are relevant. I know they've just done a building study for us to assess the existing conditions of both sites and buildings. Mike, do you want to offer anything in particular about the scope or the project or thoughts for the trust?
Sure, Andy. Well, I can just give a little bit of background. So our firm, Studio MLA Architects, has been brought in to do a feasibility study, which consists of evaluating the existing buildings on the two sites, so the Brown School and the Low Street site, looking at the sites, looking at the program, so the architectural program, working out what the space needs are for youth services. Then we're doing a series actually of focus groups online, one with students, one with parents, and one with staff, actually over the next week. Those will be happening. We've also sent out a survey. I think we've gotten over 150 responses, I want to say, about ideas about what the youth services does and the kind of space they need. So we're kind of assessing what's required, and then we're going to do a feasibility study, including some preliminary feasibility design for the two sites, and prepare a report on the two options.
This is Madeline. I'm wondering, Mike, did you say that you're not looking at any possible residential uses at the Brown School?
So that's correct. Our scope of work really focuses on the youth services part of the project. So ground floor of the Brown School and the gymnasium, and those kind of connector components on the ground floor that connect the gym and the main school building.
So you're not looking at the upper floors of the Brown School?
That's not part of what Andy's asked us to do to date. That's not part of this study, right?
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And this is, I'm not sure if all members were at the last trust meeting, but this was one of the things that I had noted was just that the work that they're doing for us, and I'm actually just going to show the first floor existing conditions plan from their draft building study. They're really only responsible for looking at youth services for the project. Remember, that's the scope that was approved by the city council in the budget. So that's why I had noted at the last meeting that their role here or discussion that could happen about housing is somewhat limited, because they're not necessarily looking at the rest of the building or what might remain there for housing, whether or not youth services stays at the Brown. But of course, as some of you, I think all of you actually know, working with Winter Street, the last time we did a study on the Brown School, there was the assumption that there'd be, for instance, some sort of lobby space on the first floor, even if youth services uses some portion of the core building, that there'd have to be a lobby space with the residential above. So we haven't, developed the concept plans. The Studio MLA is still working on that for both sites. They're really just completing the building assessments and starting to work on the concepts now. But obviously there's going to be, if youth services stays there, it's going to be a little bit more complicated, or a lot more complicated to integrate those uses on the site. And there's going to have to be some consideration for first floor arrival space for any housing that might be above. Youth services might be, quarantined off to some portion of the facility, but that is one of my concerns about having youth services stay at the Brown. I I think it makes a lot more sense for them to move to Low Street and then to have the Brown opened up completely to housing redevelopment. So I just wanted to, remind you that their scope is somewhat limited because it's devoted to this youth services project.
So as we develop concepts for the ground floor for youth services, obviously we'll need to take into account the fact that there'll be people coming in to get to the upper floors, and they'll be exiting from the upper floors that'll go through the ground floor as well. But we're not looking specifically at what's going on the upper floors.
One thing I did want to just share as well is this is actually a plan from the Winter Street study. And this just speaks to that issue I pointed out, which is that the core portion of the Brown School, forgetting the gym that's down here in this corner, that, there was an assumption that they'd have to have some sort of a residential lobby for that. Even if youth services were to keep some portion of that first floor in some way, there'd have to be a residential lobby. So whether that was down here and youth services, kept some portion there. Obviously, that's going to have to be a consideration because we can't develop concept plans for the Brown School that don't take into account the fact that there's going to be 2 upper floors that are going to be devoted to some other use and have to have access. So I don't know if trust members have particular questions for Mike or I about the project there, or wanting to make sure certain things are taken into account in any concept plans that are developed, or what's conveyed to the city council. But I don't know if the mayor wants to offer anything, but I know that I have consistently held that I think that it makes sense to move youth services to the Low Street site, depending on the cost of the plans that are developed. But I think it's going to be very complicated to keep housing and youth services at the Brown School. And I know that Mike and his team are very familiar with the building conditions and the fact that there's a lot of things in that facility that would have to be upgraded for either housing or youth services. And so that's yet another reason why I think it'd be quite complicated to try to keep youth services there and do the housing as well. So I don't know if trust members have particular questions or concerns for us.
This is Madeline. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, this is Mayor Holliday. Mike, I just had a question for you in terms of, I understand the limitations of the scope of what you're working on, but I was curious if, certainly I've looked at your proposal and when it came in and read through your work and looked at some of your past work, but I was curious if you had ever developed a youth services rec program like this in a shared use building.
So we have developed programs for youth within mixed use buildings. The most recent one we did was for the Epiphany School in Dorchester, where they have housing. In this case, it's housing for they have postgraduate, essentially teaching student teachers who come after their graduate degrees and work for a couple of years at the school. So they have housing for them, and the new building we did for them integrates that housing along with a youth center for middle school and high school age kids, along with an early education center and some of their office functions. But in that case, I guess I would say that the people who are living in the housing are intimately connected with the program itself. So they're teachers that teach, that are related to the program. So we weren't as concerned with sort of any kind, like a separation between the two or keeping them strictly independent.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Sure.
Is that building up and running in the Epiphany School?
It is. Yeah.
So we could actually look at it online?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Or we could get you photographs. We could connect you.
I would appreciate that. I just would be curious to look at, I agree completely with Andy that my preference would be for us to move youth services to Low Street, which would be, oh, look at that. The Epiphany School right there.
How about that?
Would prefer to be able to use the entire Brown School site for housing. But again, this is it's been a very complex process, which I'm sure you learned fairly quickly in terms of the vast array of opinions about this site. But anyway, thank you. I appreciate the information, and look forward to your reports and the results of your focus groups. And thank you. It's really nice to have an architectural firm on board that has the level of creative experience that you have, and that was pretty clear from your proposal. So welcome. And I know we haven't had a chance to actually meet yet, and maybe one of these days we will be able to, but appreciate you being on the call tonight, Mike.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and it's been a pleasure, certainly so far, working with your team. It's been a great. Everybody's really been good, so we're excited to get to see how it goes.
Thank you.
This is Madeline again. I was just thinking about what Andy had said about the need for some kind of residential lobby at the Brown School if there was going to be residential on the upper floors. And I wanted to, sort of echo that and also say that it seems like the neighborhood has expressed some interest, and we know there's a need for senior housing. I was just thinking, for seniors, there's always a need for some kind of drop-off area and, like a meeting area. So there's some kind of community space for people to congregate indoors. And, that's just a really important concept when you're creating a nice community residential setting. So I think it's more than just, an entrance with access to the elevator, because I think the upper floors, we've talked about wanting to try to maximize the number of units, not just to meet need, but also to make the project financially feasible. The school is not that big. And so if you're going to get enough units to cover construction costs, you want to, get as many units as possible. So what I'm trying to say is that, I would think that it would be important to create, some significant amount of square footage on the first floor for the folks who would be living on the upper floors, and also maybe to, have some intergenerational activities.
So Andy, I would just jump in if I could. That's really useful, and maybe, Andy, as we go forward with the concept design, we can make sure that we leave enough space on the ground floor for a reasonable development of some kind of common spaces, because we wouldn't want to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is one of the things that I know we at working with you had talked about somewhat early in the project, which was just that because Youth Services has actually been able to recently in the last couple of years use a good portion of that first floor there at the Brown School, the core building, which is, you're seeing this layout there in that space on the first floor from the Winter Street plan. And they had other sort of a lobby space and amenity room in this concept with smaller rooms for sort of affordable units or senior units. There was an assumption there that Youth Services their resulting space that they would have after renovation for their uses would actually probably be smaller than the gym, which is not shown here, the interstitial space between the gym and the main building here, and that whole first floor, because it's more square footage than I think we assumed for their usage. So my assumption was actually that, Youth Services might stay on the left side of the screen as you're looking at it right now, that lobby space might actually be brought over to, essentially this right side of the screen of that floor plan, so that Youth Services would still have a good portion of that floor as needed, but there'd be, as the trust members are pointing out as well, not just a lobby, but some sort of quality space associated with the housing units.
And maybe a laundry area. That's always important to have.
Yeah, so that'll be good for us to keep in mind as we develop options. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you. So we'll definitely take that into account as we're sketching out some plans for the Youth Services project, especially to highlight the importance of having that first floor landing and space. Recognize, of course, that I would expect still the majority of that first floor, a good portion of it anyway, to be used for Youth Services, but certainly there's definitely going to be space that can be I think, devoted based on the square footage to that housing, project. I think it's also worth noting, I don't know if the trust members want to highlight just the fact that the council has adopted an ordinance for the Brown School right now that may be changed, but also assumes a cap on the number of housing units in total, regardless of affordable or market, that could be built there. This is with or without youth services. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, or.
I just wanted to add one thing. This is Judy. That as you look at that lobby, I'm assuming that you'll be looking at, where's the best possible entrance in terms of which side of the building, street access, and getting to Madeline's point about possible use for seniors and having a drop-off area, which side of the building in terms of which street would be best for accessibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. There was a site plan from the Winter Street study. Again, this was just a rough, concept plan just to show it was feasible based on space. But, if youth services were to keep the gymnasium and obviously that portion of the core building, then, at least my assumption would be that the lobby and, rival space and whatever's access is there would be located somewhat here. I think it might be problematic to assume we could work within this space to do that, but I think that it'd probably be somewhere in this area right here.
I would also say that that makes a lot of sense. That would probably entail relocating the elevator as well then at that point, right? So.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. Yeah. And that we also have an undersized elevator. I don't know whether that would have to be upgraded for the housing component, but.
Yeah.
You'd probably need a service elevator as well.
Yeah. And I think all of that is a little beyond the scope of our current study. However, we want to make sure that the assumptions we're making about the available space leave enough space for development of the upper floors. So Andy, we'll have to work with you and make sure that we come up with something that makes sense there.
Right, exactly. And that's why I want to just point out there is, the Studio MLA is not doing a study of housing and youth services at the Brown. What they were asked to do and what was needed for this project was an evaluation, a comparison between the Low Street site they were in the process of acquiring from the National Guard and the Brown School if they were to stay in their existing location, because the Brown School is not adequate for them to stay there. And it's, being kept together by our maintenance folks, but it needs, certainly some improvements. It's beyond its useful life, if you will. And so it would have to be upgraded anyway. If they move to Low Street, obviously that's going to be a new facility or a renovation of the structure that's there or some expansion. And we'd probably have to provide a gym for that at that location. But if they're here, again, the study that Studio MLA is doing is a comparison between those sites, in part because there was some debate, at least amongst some council members, as to whether or not it made sense to go to Low Street versus just renovating the Brown School. I have maintained for a number of years now, I think that it's potentially problematic to try to juggle so many uses on the Brown School site. And I think this concept plan kind of shows a little bit of that because there's, in addition to the youth services in this concept, if their housing is there and the neighborhood obviously has good reason to want the fenced-in playground or basketball court, sort of park space, that's a lot of competing spaces, and it also makes it hard to configure because we can't move the existing school building footprint. So, so with that being said, I just think that Mike and I will work together with the design team to try to make sure there's a good representation of what that first floor space would look like, the portion that's not being used for youth services, and make sure that it makes sense. We can run that concept by you. I can circle back with you at one of your meetings as liaison to Studio MLA. But again, they won't be developing plans for the upper floors, for instance, or anything like that. So.
I think the other thing that this points out, Andy, is that we would need to have a reasonable, once again, or just sort of a reasonable assumption about the number of parking spaces that would need to be allocated for the upper two floors uses too, so that we're not taking all the outdoor space for outdoor uses, right? Or for parking for the youth services.
Right, right. Yep. Yeah, well, I'll definitely take a look at that feature with you. There has been or will be, it's, continued probably some debate over how many parking spaces are needed. I know the Housing Trust, at least some members have tried to advocate for less than the typical number of parking spaces required for, say, a single family home, because a lot of these folks are not going to have, the same number of vehicles. But at least for affordable units or senior units. But some counselors weren't necessarily persuaded about those ratios, and that's obviously dictated by the zoning ordinance. When we put that in the parameters of the project, but I'll give you guidance on that as we finalize the concept plan.
Great.
This is Madeline. I was wondering, Mike, are you going to sort of include a financial feasibility? Like, are you looking at, I assume you're looking at sort of construction costs on a per square foot basis. And I'm wondering, are you going to look at the possibility of getting historic tax credits as a potential funding source?
Mike, and this is Andy, I just clarify, I mean, Mike, I'm sure can elaborate on this, but they're not, the cost estimating that they're doing is the cost, ballpark, as you say, based on square footage, type of materials and that sort of thing, sort of bulk unit costs estimating, without without detailed construction plans, of what it would cost to construct at either site, and a comparison, essentially sort of apples to apples comparison as best as possible. But they're not looking into necessarily how that's financed. That's something that's on the city side, if that's what you're asking.
Well, yeah, it is what I'm asking. And I guess I was wondering because, with the historic tax credits, there's limits on what you can do to the appearance of the building. And sometimes with the federal historic tax credits on changing sort of the historic use of the interior as well. Like if there's an auditorium, sometimes they don't want you to cut it up into smaller spaces. I'm not an expert on this, but it sounds like that's a layer of complexity that won't be included in the study. It just, if you change certain things about the building, I'm thinking primarily about the school, it can negate your opportunity to get historic tax credits. I'm just sort of throwing that out there.
Yeah, this is Andy. I can speak to that. I think, we already have an understanding here that the Brown School, there's some sensitivity, at least some folks in the community who, like the presence it provides there, the history of that building, and want to maintain it largely in its present form. We've talked about even the windows, whether they could be restored versus replaced, in similar design and so forth. So I definitely expect that to be a parameter for this project. You're right about that. I don't know, the sort of gymnasium is an awkward piece of that whole space there to try to work with, but it's already there. But you're right that we would not be tinkering so much with the core building that to kind of deviate from that, because we do want to, one, remain eligible for the funding sources you're talking about, and two, satisfy a community desire to retain the core building and the history it provides to the streetscape.
I would say, Andy, that we may just have, in terms of the interior development of the first floor Brown School space, we may need to just include a caveat that we really won't know up front what the historical tax credits would require in terms of keeping certain elements in place in the building. And we have bumped up against this in the past as well. And it's very difficult to determine, I think, at the early stage of the project. So we're looking at it as if to some extent we can sort of get the inside of the ground floor, just to kind of have an apple comparison, because I think otherwise the layout would become even more inefficient than it will be anyway, because of, having to have circulation for the upper level.
Yeah, on that last point, I definitely think there's a concern there about the exterior of the building and trying to maintain some of that to the streetscape anyway, the Milk Street side and Lime Street side, let's say the gymnasium is a different piece, but I don't think there's going to be much of an issue from my experience. There's not going to be much of an issue with the interior modifications, and I don't think that's going to be a conflict, I guess is what I'm saying, in terms of the access to the tax credits and so forth, preservation of the building and all that.
Well, just for the record, I have seen it be a problem with school conversions. Like, if there's like I said, an auditorium, a large meeting space inside the school. Sometimes for the federal historic tax credits, they won't let you convert that into smaller spaces, but maybe that's not an issue here. I'm just sort of bringing
Yeah.
up
But
something.
the gymnasium here is a newer addition, actually, you know,
I'm
obviously.
not talking about the gymnasium. I agree the gymnasium probably doesn't have much historical relevance, but you know, for the first floor, I don't
Yeah.
really know.
Right.
I don't know where it would be an issue. I've just have seen it with
Yeah.
other school conversions.
Understood. Yeah, I don't think we'll encounter that based on the spaces in the first floor of the core building either. Or even any of the floors of the core building internally. I don't think that will be an issue for us.
I would keep it as a risk factor, honestly, Annie. We're working on renovation of the YMCA in Pittsfield right now, and we got some conflicting information early on in terms of what we could keep and what we couldn't keep from a historical tax credit. And there's even some of the stairways inside, which we've had to go back and retain some of the historical, moldings and components. And it has made it more difficult to work around something. So I think you're probably right, but I think there is, it's worth a little asterisk there that says, that's kind of an unknown at this point.
Yeah, no dispute. Yep. Do trust members have any other questions for Mike? I know you have the rest of your agenda as well to discuss, but is there anything else for Mike?
This is Judy. I don't have anything else.
Yeah, this is Karen. I don't either, but thank you. This has been helpful.
Okay, Mike, I just want to thank you for attending the meeting. And we'll be talking later this week. So.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks everybody, and good luck with the rest of the meeting. Stay safe, and we'll talk to everybody hopefully in the near future.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Judy, I defer to you.
Okay. Yes, this is Judy. So should we get right to a second item on our agenda? The housing assistance, the rental assistance program. So why don't we start with, I do have a list of questions that Madeline brought up within the last day or two. Do you want to go through those? And then I had a few questions of my own.
Maybe we could
Do you
start.
want me to give a quick update, Judy?
Overview? Yeah.
Okay,
That'd be great.
sure.
Okay, Judy, this is Caitlin. Would you like me to give a quick overview of where we kind of
Sure, that's
stand?
Great, thanks.
Okay, so at your last meeting, you all voted to kind of move forward with this emergency rental assistance program. Tracy Watson had sent us some templates and examples to use from a North Andover program. So we have gone ahead and adapted the guidelines and also the application to adapt it to the city of Newburyport. I've been in contact with the Pettingill House. They've taken a look at the applications and given some initial feedback. I think there's probably still some work we can do. Madeline brought up some good questions that we can go over. And we have a contact there who's going to be helping us through this. And I've also floated the North Andover MOU past them. They've agreed to kind of accept that once we add in all of the relevant, Newburyport information. So hopefully we can get this kind of sorted out by next week, if possible. And that's kind of where we stand. Probably need a few more tweaks to the application itself, but that's kind of where we stand. Hello, that's it.
So have they looked at the MOU agreement that we would have with them? I don't know if maybe Donna, you've had contact with Pettingill?
Yes, and the conversation we had, they were very, very pleased to be asked and to be part of this process, which I think is what I did. I mentioned something close to that in the follow-up email to all of you after my remote call with them. They were going to send me a sample MOU to work from, which never happened. And then, you know, I can't keep up with the workload these days. And so I asked Caitlin if she would pick this up and try and work with Pettingill House on coming to terms with what they would like for an MOU. But I
Great.
know, but you know, they're ready to go as soon as we get, you know, the pieces together that we need. So at least I did that much, and I'm really pleased with being able to work with them on this program.
Yes, I am too. This is Judy. Are there other pieces to this that we are going to need? I mean, we're looking at the MOU agreement and an application. Is there anything else that we are going to need in terms of, I know there's going to be all the documentation from the applicant. Any other agreements that we need, such as, I'm thinking between Pettingill and the landlord, who will be, that's the entity that we're going to be paying.
No, I mean, so the MOU will be, you know, to transfer funds to Pettingill House in order for them to kind of run the program, and they'll be the ones that will be dispersing the funds to the landlord.
So I've seen in some of the documentation and the guidance from MHP that they do need to be provided with the W-9 from the landlord. So I guess we're assuming that's the documentation they would need from the landlord. There wouldn't be any other agreement with the landlord. I mean, I'm just asking. I mean, obviously we've never done this before. You know, Pettingill is probably, you know, they're the entity that has the most experience with doing this kind of thing. So, I mean, if this is all that we need to get going, then
it does sort of make sense that there needs, and again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I mean, okay, so a household applies, Pettingill reviews their application, they get in contact with the landlord, they get the W-9 from the landlord, then they cut a check made out to the landlord. Is there some kind of receipt from the landlord? Is there some kind of, you know, document that verifies this transaction?
I think there does need to be that, and there needs to be something that they agree they're not evicting the person. You know, I saw something from MHP, some kind of language that the landlord signed something that says by receiving this, they accept that as full rent and they will not evict.
Although we're not paying the full rent, we're paying.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I know there was some talk about, you know, mostly it'll be fine, but you always set these things up to protect against the worst cases. And that there were some landlords in some community that were just pocketing the money and then evicting anyway. You know, there needs to be some kind of agreement that they, like you said, a receipt or something, that they're accepting this as rent, as a rental payment.
Right. That's what I was thinking. I mean, we're basically having, well, Pettingill is sending a check to an entity, to a landlord, and the intent of the check is to apply it toward applicant X's rent, and the intent is to apply it for rent for a certain month or period of time. So, I mean, again, the worst case, an entity, the landlord could say, oh, I just got this check, let me just cash it, and then not apply it for the purpose that it was intended. So, yeah, it sounds like there needs to be some kind of agreement that when they receive these funds, that somebody, maybe all parties or two parties, the applicant and the landlord signs it saying, we have received such amount. It applies to this this tenant, and it applies for this period of time.
It's almost, it's like a secondary MOU between those parties, the three parties.
Right.
Yeah, that would outline the terms and conditions and you know, I don't know if there's any recourse if something goes sideways, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, there should definitely be something that spells out very, very plainly what each party is supposed to be doing.
And we want to make sure the tenant knows that the landlord is getting this money, you know. You don't want them overpaying.
Right.
Yes, I'm looking right now. Tracy had also sent over a lease amendment that kind of talks about this. So perhaps I can touch base with her and see how, if that's what they're using for some kind of like receipt, you know, to show proof of this transaction.
Yes, Caitlin, this is Judy. Yeah, I think I did see something in that package as well that had something to do. I was just looking for it in my files. But yeah, I did see something that, you're right, it was like a lease amendment. So yeah, so maybe you could take a look at that, and that would be our third document as we're looking at the overall picture. The, you know, the application, the agreement with Pettingill, and this lease amendment.
And the other piece, which is on the tenant side, is that they've utilized whatever other assistance might be available to them, such as raft. You know, that
Right,
this
and
is
that
kind
is
of the
not
last
on
resort.
the application currently.
Okay, okay.
We do ask if they are receiving such other assistance, such as raft.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry.
So that's good to know. And I'm looking at, I see the lease agreement, lease amendment right now, and this is exactly what we're looking for. You know, it talks about the purpose of the amendment is that they're going to be receiving emergency assistance under, you know, this program, and there's a space for the tenant and landlord to sign. So I'm assuming this will be provided to Pettingill.
Great.
Caitlin, where we ask about raft, do we provide any information where any like link or something where they can find information about the raft program?
We don't, but I'll add that. That was a good suggestion on your part earlier today.
In fact, building on that, I wonder if there's something in the process that if you have not applied for raft and you're eligible, you need to do that first.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's only available to folks at 50% AMI, right, Karen?
Yes, that's true. It's going to be limited. But if we have the information there, I mean, I just wouldn't want someone to check the box, you know, no, I haven't applied and still be applying for this when they might be eligible for that.
Right, right. Yep. Yep.
I had mentioned in my little list of questions from this morning, you know, that it's a little complicated, or just, I don't know, complex, because typically when you ask somebody to verify their annual household income, you know, you're using something like the last 3 months and using that to sort of project into the future what your annual household income is going to be. But because things have changed because of the pandemic, you know, it's really their very current income that we're asking them to verify, right? So it's a snapshot of the present moment and projecting that into the future to calculate their annual household income to determine if they're income eligible.
So that this, Judy, that raises a good question. Are we providing assistance to people who currently, because of the pandemic, are now at 80% or less of AMI right now, regardless of what they have, what their past history is?
I think I was looking at the guidance and it said to show, you know, the current, show what your annual income is and then show evidence that because of this, you know, pandemic that you have, you know, had some kind of income loss.
Well, the other
Right.
thing is to look at assets, because, you know, if theoretically somebody was an attorney making really good money and has a lot of savings, but the last 3 months they haven't made much, that's still not someone we would necessarily help. So something about assets, I think.
Well, I think we need to look at assets, but I think we also maybe need to, I don't know, that I was looking at the info sheet that I sent out yesterday. I think it was number 6 that talked about this. I don't have access to it right now. I mean, I do think we need to look at assets, but I'm not sure that's enough of an I don't know, my head gets a little, I think it's complicated. And I think we can make a choice. I mean, Karen, do you think assets isn't enough?
I mean, I guess I don't have enough personal experience with this. I think assets is important. I mean, I think of programs like 40B or, you know, housing lotteries and other things, and you can't complicate it so much that you know, figure out every single situation. You have to sort of make it for most. And I think if you look at assets, and I don't know if we should set some kind of, I mean, I don't know how much someone needs to have. If they have $1,000 in the bank, are you going to make them spend it, or, you know, they can keep their $1,000 kind of thing. But there's, at some point, if they have over a certain amount, you know.
Okay. So this is Judy. I'm looking at that document from MHP. Should income eligibility be determined based on household's current income or last year's annual income? If your emergency rental assistance program is directly responding to the impact of COVID-19, income eligibility based on current income is advisable, with applicants showing a loss in income due to the pandemic.
Does it say anything about assets?
It does, I mean.
I haven't read it in a while. I remember it has something, but sorry, it's not in front of me.
I think assets is a standard. I mean, I do think it's on the application. I think it's a standard thing to ask for. I mean, if somebody's got $100,000 in the bank,
right,
they don't need this program.
Right.
It might make sense to find out if they're currently in default. Well, not that it matters. I'm sorry, I'm being a lender. But you know, if they're paying, if they're doing just fine, are they going to apply if this is truly an emergency? You know what I mean? I'm trying to determine, maybe that's a question on the application we can ask. Are you currently behind on your rent? Or
so
at the beginning.
It does, they do, number 7, should emergency rental program include an asset test? So the answer was asset tests can be time sensitive and challenging in emergency situations. Requiring recent bank statements would most likely disqualify most high wealth applicants.
Which is the desired result.
Good.
Right. So that's why the bank statements.
But I think at the beginning of our application form that we're, you know, the draft application, one of the early questions is, do you owe back rent? It doesn't say, I don't think it says, if so, how much or for what time period. It just says, do you owe back rent?
Right. That's all it says. Yeah.
I think it would be good to specify that. I don't think we should have to have somebody facing, you know, who has an eviction notice already. I don't think they should have to be at that point. But I think if they show that they're behind on the rent, I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
So getting back to, I don't think we've answered yet the income information bit. I'm still confused on that. So we're asking on the application, it says income information, your total income, and then you provide documentation that you've had, you know, some kind of decreased income. So is the income information to qualify them as a household making you know, 80% or less. I mean, is that what we're going for?
Well, let me just complicate things. It could go up to 100% AMI, right? That's the income limit for CPA funds.
Right, right, that's the income limit for that. And I think because we kind of heard that when, you know, we were talking last time, that's why I think when we voted on the 100% because we were all thinking, you know, the CPA limit. So I think that's just to answer the question, that's where that came from.
But you keep saying 80%, Judy.
Well, I know it's because I'm saying, right, I'm saying 80% because I'm wondering if we're going to change it.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Are you proposing that we do?
I don't know. I mean, I looked at our charter, because we're not bound by the CPA rules. You know, we don't have to get consent from the city council. We can disperse our funds as we see fit for affordable housing. And it does say, it says low, I think it says, oh gosh, trust declaration, here it is. For the creation and preservation of affordable housing for the benefit of low and moderate income households, which is Mass General Law 44, Section 55C. So that low moderate income households to me says 80% or less. So
if you want to be technical about it, moderate actually goes up to 120 generally.
Oh, okay. So much for that.
Only in high cost areas.
Right, true. I'm just saying 100, I think it's more if we want to make a decision, we can, whatever we want it to be. I think it's all within the spirit of it, but I don't think our charter or anything else says it has to be 80%.
Oh, okay. That's all I was looking at it for. I didn't. Okay, so whatever we want it to be, then we have to decide that. If we want to do the 100%, which is what, you know, communities that are using the CPA guidelines, they're using 100%.
I mean, given how high the AMI is in our area, that doesn't really reflect our area as much as it reflects Boston. I think 80% is reasonable. I mean, 100% is pretty, you know, it's not a high income, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm fine with 80.
I agree.
So that's what I'm assuming income information would validate, okay, this household normally is at 80% or less. And then they have to document that they've had decreased income, pay stub or verification from employer of decreased income or termination from employer if available. And then they have to have most recent bank statements, and that tells us if they have assets.
That sounds reasonable.
Let's see, what were your other questions?
So I'll change the income limits. Do you need last time you were at the meeting, you voted to have 100% AMI. Do you think there needs to be a vote to change that, or is that pretty not that important at this point?
Yeah, we should probably just have a quick vote.
Okay.
Yeah. So, do I have a motion?
I'll move 80% AMI as the income.
Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we go with 80%. All right.
Okay.
I don't.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I had just, I suggested some wording for the last sentence on the application. I don't think we need to get into that. I wanted to make sure that, you know, when we say trust, we spell out Newburyport Affordable Housing Trust. I think we need to make sure that we specify that it's a grant. Maybe we have. These are some of these are just notes I made to myself afterwards. I didn't know if we're asking for verification of assets. I didn't know if we wanted to have a limit on assets. So, you know, somebody applies, they're at 80% AMI or below, and they have 100,000 in the bank. Are they still eligible? I mean, it's probably very unlikely. How about they have 50,000 in the bank? I'm not saying, I don't have an
Yeah.
opinion. I'm just sort of opening that up as a question.
Yeah.
I think we should have a limit for sure. Not sure what the limit should be. 10,000? I don't know. I mean,
We could calculate, you know, like rent for a year, or I don't know. They could be somehow tied to the rent. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one. How do
I
you,
think if someone's making 80% AMI and they're behind on their rent, the likelihood of them having any assets is probably pretty slim.
Yes.
But, you know, the other thing I just want to say is, you know, we may do a couple rounds of this and we may need to pivot. You know, it doesn't mean it has to stay this way. We might find the errors or some enhancements that we can make after a few of these go out.
that is true. That's true. And one of the guidances that I heard on some of these calls were, you know, don't make it too complicated when you
Right.
first start out.
well, why don't we just give it a $10,000 limit or something like that?
Okay.
I mean, the purpose is to sort of weed out anyone who has enough savings that they could pay the rent. And they're just trying to, you know, get some other funds, which I understand, but that we want to reserve the funds for the people who need it most.
Right. Okay. Do we need a vote on that? Motion?
I would say yes. Motion to establish a asset limit of $10,000 for all applicants for the rental assistance program.
Okay, second.
A
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So the other question that I had was with regard to, and I did send this to Caitlin, just to have Pettingill provide us with, it does say in the MOU, I think in that draft MOU, monthly reports, maybe just a little more, where is it? A little more detail on what the monthly report should contain. You know, how the name and the address of anyone who they've given the grants to, the amount that they've granted, you know, the number of applications received, number rejected.
I was thinking I could create some kind of form and include that as an exhibit in the MOU.
Sure.
Okay.
I have a question about that. Maybe the question's for you, Donna. If they're providing us with a report and it includes people's names and addresses,
Yeah,
does that become public information somehow?
yeah. Well, maybe that's a question for Pettingill as to whether they think, you know, providing that would be a violation, if that's something that they, because I'm sure they do reporting with their other communities.
Right. I just wouldn't want a public document with people's names and
Yeah, because then it will become public. You're right.
yeah.
And I think that's a really legitimate concern. And, you know, I don't think that we want to have public records requests that we are, I mean, I suppose we could redact the information if we did get a public record request of names and addresses, because it is confidential information. Essentially, this is why we're asking Pettingill House to manage this program, in that, with their experience, and they're not subject to the open meeting law. But when they send us a written report, it does.
Right. Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, do we really need to know the names?
No, I don't think we do. No.
We don't
Might
really,
have
you
some-
don't need
I
to
think
know
that's
the
a
answer.
question, Caitlin. I think that's a question to have with Pet and Gill.
Okay.
How they manage that, and that, remind them of the public records request, and that we are concerned about, client confidentiality, and how do they typically manage, when they have to submit reports that would become public records to, state or city municipal agencies. And we can resolve that one pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, I think in looking at it, I think what we're mostly concerned with is, how many applications are they getting? How many people have they actually helped? How much money, how much of our funds have they used? That's really the important information.
Right.
And there could be some kind of clause in there. I mean, they'll know, but some sort of clause that says, the trust or the city can come to Pet and Gill and look at their records at any time or something like that. Just, again, I totally trust Pet and Gill, but just sort of looking for a worst case scenario that they're not misusing the money in some way.
Right. Yeah, I think there's something already in the document about that, the fact that we can inspect their records.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Do we know how much we're paying Pet and Gill to administer the program for us?
Well, I offered to them the amount that we had thrown out. I said, this is, we really would like this program to go forward as soon as possible. And we know that there are administrative costs. And I told them that the trust would be willing to work with them, somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. They thought that was very reasonable and could work. So I don't know, Caitlin, have they given you a more definitive number?
No, not yet. I thought we had
Okay.
talked about 10, but now that I know it was between 5 and 10, I'll try and get some clarity on that.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. So any other discussion about the application itself and the process?
I'll work on it over the weekend and next week and try and touch base with Pat and Gil again and then send it back around as soon as possible. Okay.
Be nice
Do we
if
have an
could-
anticipated launch date? Can we
I would
come
like
up with
it
a
to be
date?
launched by June 1st at the latest.
Okay. Great.
Great.
And Mayor, are you going to do a press release?
Of course,
Oh, good.
of course, with all of your names in there and
Oh,
phone
boy.
numbers and email addresses and pictures. No, of course, we will do a press release on this, and it's really important. I mean, I have mentioned it that we're working on this in my updates to the council and the public. I think I mentioned it in one of my Thursday afternoon updates, but we certainly will do once this is available and ready to go, ready to launch. We will do a big press release. Yes, absolutely.
Fabulous. Great.
So, at our last meeting, did we vote on a maximum amount of funding
10.
towards the
I
program?
thought we did 10.
10,000?
No, it would have been more than that. A
Oh,
maximum.
maximum 100.
Oh, I'm sorry for the how much we're going to give to Pet and Gill initially. Yes, I'm sorry, 100,000 plus the 10 for administrative fees.
Right. Right. And then I think per household, I know the application says, I can't remember, what is per household? It's limited to
3 months.
4,000?
Oh,
3 months?
that's what I remember. 3 months.
Yep, 3 months.
I don't think we had a cap on the amount of rent that we would pay. I don't remember us doing that. I just remember us talking about how much we would give initially to Pet and Gill administrative costs and how many months someone could receive assistance from this fund.
We said the maximum monthly dollar amount would be 1,000, which means a total grant amount of 3,000 per household.
And Caitlin, are they, I don't have the application in front of me, but I looked at it this morning. Are they required to pay 50% of the rent?
Yes.
So we'll pay up to 1,000. They have to pay, if their rent is 2,000 a month, we pay 1,000, they pay 1,000, and the max they can get is 3,000 for
Correct.
3 month time period.
Yeah, 3 months.
Okay, so this,
Comfortable with that?
no. So, okay, let's work out a situation where we have somebody who meets all the criteria. They have no, they've been laid off, they're getting, minimal amount of unemployment at this point, and their rent is $1,400 and they have 2 kids, and they can't even come up with the extra $400 and they're gonna be evicted. Are we gonna live with that?
I agree, Donna. I'm a little concerned about making a match, because if somebody's coming to us at that point, I would think they need the whole rent.
They're desperate. They're desperate. I don't think we should put a requirement. I think that that's part of the application process and evaluation that happens with Pettingill with the, that's part of the $10,000 or whatever we're paying them, that they find out when they look at their assets, they look at their bank statement. Look, we need you to be able to put forward $200 towards your rent and we'll give you $1,000 this month. I think we have to have some flexibility here. That's the whole point of doing this program. And $100,000 isn't going to go very far. And I know we want to stretch it, but we're trying to help people so that they don't end up on the street, especially, like a mother with a couple kids and, in her car or something. And if they can't come up with that extra $100, we eliminate them from the program.
I think we came up with that from what other communities are doing. I'm not advocating for it, but my guess, it either came from that or something we discussed at our last meeting, right, Caitlin?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people were doing policy and creating these programs without really drilling down to, the individual situation. And maybe we could ask Pettingill to be a little flexible with this. The first priority is for the applicant to provide some level of match or some support towards their rent. But if they can't, then I think that needs to be taken into consideration.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do we want to limit it? I'm fine with that. Do we want to limit it to $3,000 per household and a 3 month, rent supplement?
Where did we come up with $3,000? If the average rent in Newburyport is $2,000,
Maybe it goes back to them paying 50%.
Yeah, I'm kind of blanking on how of our last conversation, but
I think we were looking at maybe what North Andover's doing. That's all I can figure.
Yeah, I think we were as well.
I guess my feeling is that people who are in this position, if they've lost their job and they don't have any real savings, whatever they're scraping together, they're spending on food.
correct,
So,
or medication.
or medication. So I'd rather kind of cover their rent and they don't get evicted for up to 3 months. There could be some limit, I don't necessarily want to pay someone's rent who's paying $4,000 a month, and, they shouldn't be in such an expensive place to begin with, but maybe 2,000 maximum per month.
Hmm.
Suzanne, you're quiet. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see ideally that, whatever we put down there, 30% of their rent. But that, Pettingill would need to, in the application and underwriting process, they could make the determination. Because what if, they do have other sources of a way to have some skin in the game, then that's obviously a good thing. But I think it should be fluid. If needed, then we should cover it. But I mean, I don't know what limit. I think, you know, when you're talking about 3 months, then basically, you know, they have to reapply after 3 months, assuming we still have money.
Well, if we limit it to $2,000 a month rent supplement, and it's for 3 months, that's $6,000 per household. $100,000 divided by 6,000 is 16 households we could assist.
It's not very many, is it?
Right.
But
I
it's
mean,
possible.
look this is how I feel. The landlord is going to have to take a haircut too, don't forget. Right? So everyone's taking a haircut. The bank, the landlord, the tenant, and us. So that's how it works. So we shouldn't have to feel the burden to take on the whole thing, because the landlord's going to have to take something on as well.
Right. Right.
Well, but then we'd have to get the landlord to agree to that. That's what I was saying earlier about that they agree not to evict, which I don't know if they're going to agree if it's not the full rent.
It'd be so hard to, first of all, there's no eviction. Secondly,
No.
it'd be so hard to evict anybody at this point. No.
No, you're right now. But I guess I see it all happen, you know, 3 months from now, whenever the restrictions are lifted, I think.
I agree with Suzanne. I think everybody has to take a cut, so to speak, with this. I don't think it's reasonable for the trust to, you know, subsidize everyone. That, you know, everybody should kind of have a share in this.
And let's face it, it's the landlord getting the money. You know what I mean? On behalf of the tenant, yes, but ultimately, so.
Right.
And if the rents are inflated already, you know where I'm going? So anyway,
Yes.
like I said, let's see how we go with the first few, and we'll definitely pick up on those nuances as we move along.
Yeah.
And Kate, and that's a conversation that you can have with Pettingill House and tell them, you know, this is our concern. You know, if someone needs an extra $150 to $200 to, you know, make the rent and get whole, then, you know, we don't want to be that rigid. You know, there is going to be some flexibility, but we also certainly do not want to be spending, you know, $3,000 a month in an extraordinary rental. So maybe you could have a conversation with them about that too.
I will. Yep, about the program
You know,
limit.
that our goal is to try and limit it to, you know, maybe $1,500 a month maybe is more reasonable in terms of what the ongoing rent is.
Okay.
Is what our max would be for 3 months, and see if we can sort of hold there. And then if they come back to us and say this isn't working at all, then we immediately regroup and figure out another strategy. But, you know, I think giving a landlord in Newburyport $1,500 a month when he's got a tenant he can't evict who can't pay the rent, I think that's a nice gift.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to start somewhere. We have to start with an amount that we're going to give, the number of months, the maximum amount, and what the tenant can pay, and
Right.
see what happens. And like Suzanne said, if we have to redo it, we have to redo it.
I would recommend we go to 1,500. I think that's a little closer to reality here in terms of rents.
Yep. So 1,500 per month for 3 months, maximum 3
Up
months.
to 1,500.
I think that's good. I'm fine with that. I do think it will help Pettingill to have some guidelines.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So okay, up to 1,500 a month.
Yes.
4,500
What about the match?
If they can.
So are we still saying the match is 50%? Because that's what we had voted last time.
Well, I think we were going by Andover's piece, and, you know, I think that's where you start with an applicant. You know, we are, you know, encouraging people to at least cover 50% of their rent. And then somebody breaks down and cries and says, I can't make that, I can't do that. Then, you know, there's got to be a little bit of give and take here. But, you know, we want some level of contribution if at all possible, but not putting undue burden on a family.
Right. So that's kind of the message that gets conveyed.
It's a guideline.
Yes.
So, right, exactly. So we have guidelines.
So I wouldn't even put 50%. I would just, the way Donna said it was perfect. I would just, use that kind of language and not put a number on it.
Okay.
And Pep and Gul will figure that out. They'll be working with the person to see, are they getting unemployment? What kind of savings do they have? What have they got?
And all this has to be done remotely, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a question for Pat and Gail. I don't know how they've been conducting business. If they have an outside area, they're able to work with people. I don't know, to meet with people now that the weather's been better. I don't know.
Hard.
I will ask that, but as of right now, they're anticipating, applications being either, emailed or dropped off at their office.
Yep,
Not everybody has copiers and scanners.
right.
Yep. And if they need a paper copy, then Pat and Gil will leave it for them, they said.
So we're changing it to up to $1,500 per month.
Yes.
3 months.
Okay. Need a vote on that? Have a motion?
Motion to authorize up to $1,500 a month and the Affordable Housing Trust Rental Assistance Program for a maximum of 3 months with client contribution whenever possible.
All right, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good. Okay, so is there anything more we need to discuss on this item?
I think this all came together really nicely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin, for all your
Yeah.
work. Donna,
Yeah.
Judy.
Thank you.
No, this
Yeah,
was really
so-
this was really a great team effort, and I'm really pleased that we've been able to, offer this kind of support for people in the city. So this is great. Thank you. This is good. All right, moving on.
Moving on. So Caitlin, on the other items, we've got just wanted to touch on them. The refinance, DHCD has approved that for Richardson. So there's something that I need to sign on that.
Yeah, you just need to sign saying that this group kind of voted on it, and your approval is kind of subject to DHCD approving it as well.
Okay,
So
so do we need a
We have
vote
to
on
take a
that?
formal vote. Okay.
Okay, so motion to approve the refinancing for, I forget what,
5 Richardson Path.
5 Richardson Path.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So Caitlin, do I just send you an email on that to approve it?
I have a little form that DHCD sends around, so I'll make sure I send that to you, and then you can just type your name on it.
Okay, good. All right. So the Bashaw Way plan, they sent us a copy of their LIP program, their marketing plan and lottery plan, and I did provide everybody a link to it. I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at it. It seemed pretty standard. Seemed kind of the boilerplate. I guess the only question I had is, there weren't any details as to how they're going to do the actual lottery during the pandemic.
Yeah, what's the schedule for that? Does anybody know?
Yeah, this is Andy. I don't know what the time frame is. If we're talking about the new project, I mean, they haven't even got through permitting yet. So
Oh, no, this is the Colby Farm 1, I guess.
yeah, I mean, but even that one, I mean, they're under construction right now. I guess I would expect that fall would be the very earliest that they'd be able to, and that's assuming they're able to move aggressively.
Yeah, but I'm thinking the way they did the Parker Hill lottery is they videotaped it and then submitted that.
Oh,
They
okay.
videotaped the lottery agent pulling names out.
That works,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Well, that would be great. I mean, it was sort of hard to,
Madeline,
Hello?
hello? Did we lose her?
Loser?
no, we don't know what
Still
any of
on.
the dates are.
Still here.
She's still there.
Hello?
Hmm. Her mic is on.
Are you talking about me?
Yeah.
You
You were
can't hear me?
talking and disappeared.
Oh, well, I'm
This is why we
sorry.
need to see each other.
It could be my internet connection. I was just saying it was sort of hard to evaluate it without any dates because, you know, you don't know whether they're giving enough time for marketing or,
Right.
and-
There was no schedule.
so I think that it would be good if they could get back to us when they know what their marketing and schedule is and lottery date. That was one comment. I thought that they should mention, I didn't see this, I thought they should mention that the housing trust is available for down payment assistance.
Yep.
And they say, in terms of their marketing groups, they're gonna include the YMCA, and it really should be the YWCA.
W, yeah.
And I thought they might want to include the hospital. You know, I would think there might be people working at the hospital who would want to apply. And I didn't know if they were going to have like a marketing website. Like it would be great if people could see pictures of what the buildings are going to look like. And, you know, they say that they're going to have applications available at City Hall and at the library. And they're going to have an info session at the City Hall. You know, all of this stuff, it's just totally different in these circumstances. So I didn't feel like they gave us a COVID-19 marketing plan.
No, they didn't. No, it was, they just copied it from someone else. It was very, it sounded like the Parker, or looked like the Parker Hill one.
Yeah. And the marketing agent is in Wilmington, you know, so it's just, I think they need to get us something that's updated for the current circumstances. I mean, I thought it in general looked fine. It just, you know, things are really different today. So.
Right. Caitlin, can you work on that?
I will, yes.
Okay. Can I just add one other piece about this? I know it's not specific to the Affordable Housing Trust, but I just, they came and presented to us regarding, I guess it's Colby Farm 2, and that one of the amenities they were going to include with that development was to build a fully accessible playground.
Yeah, they mentioned that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this all of a sudden has become a real concern for Molly Ettenborough, and the fact that the trucks and the amount of traffic that comes down Colby Farm Lane now because of the recycling in the compost, and that she is absolutely 100% opposed to having a playground there because she's just really worried about kids darting across the street from the other side to get to, you know, the playground. And since we have a group of people in our community who have been strongly advocating for a fully accessible playground, I thought, and they wanted on Bartlett and Mall, why don't we get them to do it there?
Yes. Good
Okay.
idea.
Okay, well, I just wanted to be sure the trust knew that because this was part of one of the amenities they presented to the trust. And it was of grave concern as this started to really, you know, be thought out in terms of the, you know, the site and Colby Farm Lane and the traffic, etc. So I appreciate the fact that you understand that concern, and there will be more obviously coming on that, but thank you.
Yeah, that sounds like a good solution to me.
You know, it's a centrally located playground. It's where this group really wanted a fully accessible playground. It's safe. It's at the Bartlett Mall. It's been, you know, there's a wrought iron fence around it. It could really work very well there. So anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So we do have a down payment application for Parker Hill. Anything you need from us, Caitlin, on that one?
No, this is just the one that's been, she applied before even the lottery. So this was just kind of just reminding you all that we do have that one kind of under review.
Okay. And I did see we're applying for Housing Choice, which is great.
That's great. Do we have to specify what we would use the money for?
Right now, we're just getting the designation. You know, we thought we were able to demonstrate, you know, 3% housing increase over the past 5 years through building permits, and we thought that we had been able to demonstrate some of the best practices that they're looking for in order for us to get the designation. And then I think once we get that, then you apply for grants.
Okay, great.
Okay.
That's all I have at this point for updates. Do you all think we need to set another date to review this application, you know, via Zoom call, or can we kind of do this over email? What are your thoughts? The rental
Let's see.
assistance program, I mean.
Don't you think we could probably do it over email?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Fine with me.
And if it's too complicated and lots of questions come up, Madeline, then we can schedule a Zoom meeting and then just run through all those and be sure we're all on the same page. But you know, we're pretty close to finalizing it, and it really depends on what happens with Caitlin's conversations with Pet and Gull House, I think.
Yeah, yep.
All right,
Yep.
then.
Sounds good.
All right. Do we need to set a next meeting date?
Month from now?
Incredible how open my calendar is.
Oh, I wish.
Well, for me, for evenings, but not for you, Donna.
June 10th?
I'm fine with me.
Good for me.
For me.
That looks good.
Okay.
Oh, Caitlin, you'll just work with Diane, get that posted, or?
Yep, June 10th. That sounds good.
Okay.
Looks like it works. Yep.
Great, thanks, everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Motion
Yeah,
to adjourn.
Thanks for everything, Caitlin.
Okay.
And Ann.
Take
And
care,
Donna.
everybody.
Take care. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.